Hello from Odessa, Ukraine. I'm going to talk about the 21st Canto of Paradiso with a student of mine, Anastasia. My name is Alessandra Borgia. I teach Italian at Mechnikov University.
Hello, my name is Anastasia Sidorchuk. I study foreign languages at the Faculty of Romano-Germanic Philology to become a translator and an interpreter. Dante's anniversary has been a great opportunity to learn more about this extraordinary poet and his work. The 21st Canto of Paradiso, which we are going to talk about today, presents various exegetical problems, but I think the important thing is to grasp the centrality of the figure of Pier Damiani, a saint who combines the ardor of action with the depth of meditation. We can find much food for thought in this canto without flattening the past onto the present with medieval eras of perspective.
Of course, Dante is a man of the Middle Ages. If we still appreciate his masterpiece, the Divina Commedia, it's not because we recognize in it anticipations and prophecies of modern times. The same way the medieval scholars saw the Virgil of the fourth Eclogue as a prophet of Christ's birth. If Dante is still relevant, it's for the aesthetic value of his poetry. A work of art is such when it makes universal, through the excellence of the form, an individual historical content, breaking down the barriers of time and space. A preacher's flat sermon with the same contents would probably not even have been handed down to us, or it wouldn't have interested and moved anyone.
Definitely. Whatever, it would be nice to be able to cross a space-time door and meet Dante not in the afterlife, but still alive, in his time, to ask him questions and perhaps surprise him with the revelation of the future. I will then imagine that you are Dante, and I will ask you what I would ask him if I met him.
Great.
When you arrive in the sky of Saturn, you no longer see Beatrice's smile. She explains that if she smiled at you due to your human limitations, you would be overwhelmed by your astonishing beauty, just as Semele was incinerated by the thunderbolts of Jupiter when she wanted to see her lover in his full divinity. Once again, you draw on Ovid's Metamorphoses. You also refer to Ovid when you allude to the Golden Age as the Age of Saturn.
Dentro al cristallo che il vocabolo porta, cerchiando il mondo del suo caro duce, sotto cui giacque ogni malizia morta.
Contemplative spirits come towards you like bright stars descending a golden staircase. It's the ladder that Jacob dreams of in the book of Genesis. In Jacob's ladder, St. Thomas sees the symbol of contemplation, and St. Pier Damiani writes that through the ladder the angels descend to earth to help man, and man ascend to heaven. In your work, there is a constant reference to authors who preceded you. That is why today some accuse you of a lack of originality. Why do you so often resort to the images and words of others?
The poet is like a bee. They cannot produce honey without sucking pollen from flowers. The creation from nothing belongs only to God. Men have to be content with giving form to what already exists.
Since the end of the 18th century, machines have replaced man's work, and men have been afraid of no longer having space to express their humanity and creativity. That's why maybe intellectuals suggested the principle of the absolute originality of the artistic genius, as if to reserve for the individual his own intangible space, in which machines cannot operate in his stead. Today, many great poets of the past, like you, would be reported for plagiarism, a kind of theft.
Very strange. The great poets have always challenged their models in an attempt to surpass them. I myself was the winner in the challenge with Ovid, as I wrote in the 25th Canto of Inferno. His were pagan metamorphoses, mine are Christian metamorphoses. A big difference. As for absolute originality, well, I just don't think it's possible.
I find quite original, actually, the comparison between the movement of souls along the staircase and the crows numb from the cold of the night. Some rise up and do not return, others instead return, still others wonder where they are. Can we consider the crows an allegory of the monks?
To tell the truth, when I wrote that simile, I thought of nothing but the crows, observed so many times in the countryside of northern Italy during the wanderings of my long exile. St. Francis also liked birds, so much so that he gave a sermon for them, and they, exultant, stretched their necks, opened their beaks, spread their wings, touched his tunic.
Therefore, the naturalistic comparison is not entirely foreign to the spirituality that characterizes the contemplative life.
It's the very contemplation of nature and its movement that leads to the contemplation of God, a pure object of love, who, without moving, causes movement of the sun and of the other stars. Only heretics think that all that is matter comes from the devil.
Saint Pier Damiani was born in Ravenna, a town you love. He was a monk and a prior in the monastery of Santa Croce di Fonte Avellana. How did the monks live in that hermitage?
The monks wore white woolen robes, lived in separate cells, and observed strict silence. They had 4 Lents a year, with fasting and rigorous penances. Every day they recited the entire Psalter twice, once for the living and once for the dead. They also had a library full of quotes. Thanks to Pier Damiani, the Hermitage became a cultural and spiritual center of great importance, where many reached holiness. In your times, does the Hermitage still exist?
Yes, it does. After centuries of decline and abandonment, the Hermitage regained its splendor, and in 1982, the Pope went to visit it to celebrate the millennium of its foundation. The complex is surrounded by extraordinary wild nature. The botanical garden is now open to the public. In the library, there are still valuable manuscripts, including an 11th century codex, the first breviary of the Avellanite community, and a precious document of the evolution of musical notations. The verses you wrote are engraved on a plaque at the entrance to the church.
Tra 2 liti d'Italia surgon sassi, e non molto distanti alla tua patria, tanto che troni assai suonan più bassi, e fanno un gibbo che si chiama Catria, di sotto al quale è consecrato un ermo che suole esser disposto a sola latria.
But Pier Damiani didn't isolate himself from the world, not only because he received from Pope Stephen IX, albeit reluctantly, the cardinal's purple, which for a certain period kept him away from the monastery, but because he collaborated with various popes to reform the church, both with his writings and with participation in various missions in Milan, in Mainz, in Cluny.
Saturn, a dry and cold planet, exerts its influences on contemplative natures. The constellation of Leo induces the ardor of action. I've always admired in Pier Damiani the perfect fusion between the depth of meditation and the polemical intensity with which he expressed his anxiety for renewal, his indignation for the corruption of the clergy.
Unfortunately, the observance of evangelical poverty vanished, and the general corruption of the clergy spread among the monks as well.
Venne Cefas e venne il gran vasello dello Spirito Santo, magri e scalzi, prendendo il cibo a qualunque ostello. Or voglion quince e quindi chi rincalzi li moderni pastori, e chi li meni tanto son gravi, e chi di rientro li alzi. Copron di manti loro i palafreni, sì che due bestie van sotto una pelle. Oh, pazienza che tanto sostieni.
While the apostles Peter and Paul, thin and barefoot, were content with whatever food they found in their wanderings, the prelates of your time want to be accompanied by people who bring them the train and help them get on the saddle. So heavy and ambitious are they. Pierre Damiani tells you that their long fur-lined cloak covers two beasts, the prelate and the horse. That's a very strong expression of contempt.
Corrupted people deserve contempt. I personally suffered the consequences of political corruption during my long exile. In your day, does corruption still exist?
Corruption, unfortunately, hasn't yet been eradicated, and in some countries, those who fight it are threatened, beaten, imprisoned, or even killed.
And even in your day, have people forgotten the value of silence and meditation as grounds for effective action?
Yes, even more so than yours. Today, mass media that not even you, with your fervent imagination, could have imagined, multiply the words and spread them on the surface of the earth. But, as an Italian poet, Eugenio Montale, said, only the isolated speak, only the isolated communicate. The others, the men of mass communication, just echo.
Really sad to know. And how does the Pope intervene in the political struggles of your time?
Today, the Pope no longer has an army, and about a century and a half ago, he lost his vast dominions in central Italy.
Has the Emperor of Germany finally recovered his temporal power, leaving the Pope the only authority that belongs to him, as I hoped for in my treatise De Monarchia?
It was not the Emperor of Germany who put an end to the temporal power of the Church, but the King of Savoy, with some help actually from Germany, which was then called Prussia. When the Italian peninsula and the islands of Sicily and Sardinia were still, as in your time, divided and dominated by foreign powers or by the Church, brave men with pen and sword, with blood and words, built a nation politically united for the first time after the fall of the Roman Empire, 1,400 years earlier.
And which language is now spoken in a united Italy?
The language of united Italy is the Florentine dialect.
Well, in my time, it's very difficult to communicate outside Tuscany with people who don't speak Latin. Do you mean that now a Sicilian and a Venetian communicate using the Florentine dialect and understand each other?
Exactly, but now the Florentine dialect is called Italian.
And why was it decided that Florentine dialect should become the language of the united Italy?
Let's say that in Florence, in your century, literary works of a certain value were written, and your comedy in 700 years had, so to speak, a good number of views. That's why in the following centuries, many poets and writers, although they didn't speak Florentine, used a language very similar to yours in their works. And 160 years ago, when the Kingdom of Italy was born from Etna to Mont Blanc, people with a humanist background understood Florentine as educated people in your times understood Latin.
I suppose, in a sense, I might be considered the father of the Italian language. That's incredible.